Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 14th day of February 2023. How would I forget that? Today says Mahanu tells me that today is an important day. My name is Sam Gituko. Karibu sana to the conversation. I want to introduce them. Titus Mahanu is an advocate of the High Court. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
Any greetings you want to send? No.
Yes.
Dr. Eric Omolo is an advocate of the High Court as well. Good morning.
Good morning, and probably I should send greetings.
You want to?
I mean, you know, we've come a long way in the country, and it's good to celebrate all our mothers, all our spouses, and our daughters and sisters, particularly this special Valentine's Day.
Okay.
I understand Titus and his group are going for a conference.
Oh, yeah. Are you attending?
I understand there are three things that are happening. First, today is Valentine's Day, and I think my tie sends a very strong signal that I am sending.
I'm told that's maroon.
Good messages. No, this is red. Good messages to all, you know, our women, our mothers, our daughters, and everybody. Secondly, I am told today also is the men's conference. And then thirdly, it's a prayer day. The president declared that we should all go, I think, to Nyayo or Kasarani for prayers. So I think
for rain or what?
Praying for rain and the situation in our country.
Okay.
So you can see we have got three important things, and I want to wish everybody.
Which one are you attending?
I may try to start with the one at Kasarani, then the men's conference, then I finish with the Valentine's.
Okay, all right. I have nothing useful to add. So let's just dive into the conversations this morning. On the front page of the Daily Nation, killing fails. President William Ruto orders KDF to join security operation. In the last 6 months, over 100 civilians and 16 police officers have been murdered in banditry-prone areas, with schools, churches and police vehicles burnt by bandits who have become even more brazen, escalating their terror activities on locals and law enforcement agencies. That's one story, but also there's that story that we find Uhuru caught up in fierce fight for Jubilee party. A split in former president's party continued to widen, at least as 10 former MPs yesterday pledged to work with President Ruto. Then on the front page of the Standard, prayers versus barazas. This is related to what Titus is saying. As experts warn of economic turmoil, the country has slid back into the campaign period with rallies in the name of prayer meetings and public barazas. But Parliamentary Budget Office economists say there is need to rethink the financial model adopted if money is to get into people's pockets or business return to profitability. Then there's Night of Long Knives, Jubilee to axe errant MPs. Purge has been called on members, causing up to government. Jubilee insists its commitment is to the opposition, and any contrary statement must be sanctioned. We'll talk about that later on. But first, when you look at the situation, I mean, we are talking about it in an interesting or maybe a funny way, that is the prayers and the politics. But at this point in time, what are your reflections, Dr. Komolo, that Parliament is resuming at a time that the times are pretty difficult? I don't know if it's the same in your profession or in your area, but you can see Kenyans are dealing with these challenges, and there appears not to be any logical solution, at least for the short term.
Thanks, Sam. Perhaps before I chip in, I've also noticed that yesterday was the third anniversary of the death of Robert Ouko. Right. And the family has given an elaborate interview there. It's unfortunate that we still have a history of this unexplained assassinations and murders and all that. And this can be linked to the main headline, the banditry that's happening in North Rift. And that I hope the government has concrete solutions as opposed to militarizing the entire operation. Back to the real story. So Parliament is resuming for sure, and I took time to listen to Kimani Ichung'wah and the rebuttal by Opiyo Wandayi. And what struck me was actually Ichung'wah's overemphasis on the numbers, that they have the numbers to pass supplementary budget and things like that, which is not a bad thing. The bigger question is what is in the supplementary budget, and in an economy that is depressed across all sectors, including the legal profession where we work on a daily basis. Basically, there's not much money circulating, there is, I know they don't want to admit, but there's dollar scarcity in the market, which could be attributed to several things, including just lack of international trade inflows into the country. And so you expect that Parliament will be a little bit more proactive, including the President himself and, of course, all players, to trigger the economy. Triggering the economy does not mean that they just give money, but it means that they invest in activities that will bring money into circulation. Bringing money to circulation normally has something to do with infrastructure, normally has something to do with subsidizing certain critical sectors like agriculture and all that. And reading The Nation in particular, you notice that they have cut by well over 60, 70, 80% major infrastructure projects that the last government left in place. Right. So the Mau Mau Road, the Mukisumu, Moroni, Chemelil, all that road that had been launched, they have reduced the budget, estimated at around 46 billion or something like that. So you wonder how they're going to trigger economic activity. I think that the government is also investing in a bit of diversionary tactics by, for example, over-criticizing opposition rallies and things like that. And I want to link that to economic activity and, of course, circulation of money. Just yesterday, the Israelis spent the entire day protesting over intended changes to the law that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has initiated, trying to contain the judiciary and things like that. And the person who was leading it is the immediate former Prime Minister of Israel. It's called Yair Lapid or something like that. So rallies are not unique to Kenya. Israel is 10 times plus richer than Kenya, and they are able to sustain political activity while also investing in diversifying their economy and all that. And Titus was saying a very important thing here, that in Israel they don't pray for rain. Today, Kenyans, we are going to pray for rain. So I think Parliament needs to find its acts in order. They need to pass a supplementary budget that will trigger the economy. Right. They need to talk less, act more on substance. And obviously they need to not be too jittery, particularly the government, not be too jittery about opposition activities, particularly if they are peaceful and are obviously no threat to the democratization of Kenya.
Titus, it's good to pray, but are we at a time that we're running out of options or creativity? And beyond looking up to the Lord, what else can we do in such circumstances?
Now, prayer is a very good prayer. Prayer is a tool through which human beings join themselves with our Creator, and it's a good thing when you associate yourself with the Creator, with your Creator. And prayers are not just supposed to be done when you're in a problem. Even when you are successful, you are supposed to also pray for the victory and success. But most importantly, Kenya is now at a point where things seem not to be working. Kenyans don't have money, there is drought, there is famine, the economy is doing badly. And basically it appears like structures that have been put in place are not working. So what is it that needs to be done? Amid all these problems that we have, one of the most important things that you have to appreciate is that the government has laid out and rolled out a lot of plans that are intended to recover the economy, that are intended to fix the structures that will enable the country move ahead progressively as intended. But one of the things that, one of the major factors that is lacking is the government seems not to have money. Now, how does this government ensure that it can create money to progress the manifesto, the ideas that it has for the betterment of the Kenyans? Initially, there was a good proposal on ensuring that everybody pays tax. Because at the point where we are, and remember when the president was just about to take over government, and when he took over government, they used to say that when you find yourself in a hole, you need to stop digging. Right. So nowadays, sadly enough, I don't hear of that. That was a very good point to begin from, because first we realized that our country, our foreign debt, is almost escalating the expected ceiling that we have. So what do you do when you find yourself in a place where you are unable to generate income? You try and look around at the available sources around. And one of the things that had been suggested is that everybody should pay tax. I support that. Why do I support that? I support that because right now we cannot borrow more than what we have done. And the government needs to fund its activities. Instead of these diversionary acts that we are witnessing, the government ought to have come up with incentives like a tax census operation or an operation that will ensure that, first of all, they capture the data of every person that is supposed to pay tax, give Kenyans that all the government taxes waivers, and ensure that everybody tax records have been captured and everybody has updated their tax records so that the government can now collect money. And most importantly, once that money has been collected, the president should ensure that that money is not stolen. That money is safeguarded because this is the only bullet we have as a country. We cannot keep on borrowing because borrowing will make us now fall into an abyss which we will never come out of it, and the vicious cycle will always continue. So the solution is let us increase our tax base, and once the taxes have been collected, we have to protect those taxes with our dear lives so that the country can slowly have money to fund its project and so on and so forth.
But at a time that you're witnessing a lot of these shifts, if you look at the papers, they're talking about the standard Night of Long Knives, Jubilee to axe errant MPs. And they're errant because they have decided to go speak to the president and sort of have a working arrangement. I understand that there's a push to have Jubilee recognized as a parliamentary party so that even if they're in the minority, they're also a parliamentary party that can be considered for certain things in the House. Are we missing the point when you are dealing with issues? Because there's so much going on in the public rallies, but not about the real issues. What then must Parliament do as they resume today?
It is sad that we are just about almost 4 months after the elections, and the pledges, the 100 days period has already lapsed.
It's actually 5 months.
Yes, 5 months.
Since President
The 100 days lapsed, and we have not witnessed any concrete or any, serious progress towards the economic recovery, ensuring that we have security, ensuring that Kenyans have money, and so on and so forth. So what Parliament needs to do is to try and discuss on things that matter to the country. For example, right now, if you look at the counties, they're still complaining that the government is not disbursing money on time. It is not giving them the money that is supposed to be given to them. The 15% that was meant to be given to them, in fact, I'm told, has been reduced to 14%. And I've had chance to speak to a number of governors, and they're telling me they have now been reduced to governors who just pay salaries and overheads. Because the money that comes in is used to pay the salaries and to pay the recurring, the pending bills that they inherited from their predecessors. So Parliament needs to start talking in one voice. In as much as they have a right to push the agenda of their different political device, but they need to come together and say, as Parliament, what is it that we can do to ensure that we put our country on an economic recovery path, so that they try to push the executive to come up with ways that will now increase revenue. The Parliament should not just be, Parliament as crafted today, they are looking at numbers, and you can see how the leader of the majority is always talking that we have numbers to push the agenda of the government. They are supposed also to push the agenda of the government on ensuring that the government is delivering the services, the government is delivering on the manifestos that they promised Kenyans. But sadly, we are not witnessing that. So Parliament needs to ensure that they debate, they bring motions that are there to compel the executive, ensure that it starts acting towards what it promised Kenyans.
Okay. All right. And Daktari, so as you reflect on the state of politics, and we saw over the weekend Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president, coming out and saying that I may be retired, but I'm not tired. Also saying that my leader, I'm quoting him, is Raila Odinga, and that people still need to have services delivered to them. But he's doing this at a time the law says that within 6 months he has to leave any office of a political party. And of course, he's saying that he may not be playing active politics, but once he's sent by his leader, he will go. His political party, the Jubilee, is in turmoil. They have suspended their Secretary General. The Secretary General says that they have no mandate because that meeting they held was not even held at the party headquarters. How then does an exiting party leader, if he follows the law, manage such a political party that is actually the immediate former ruling party? And what does that also say about our politics?
Just before I get into that, some parliament does not have to pass President Ruto's supplementary budget, particularly if it is stifling the economy. The role of making budgets is actually that of parliament, starting with the budget committee and then going to the plenary. And if members of parliament can notice that, you know, and they have been advised by Parliamentary Budget Office that what you're having here is going to create more pain to the economy, then they should just debate it honestly and probably reject it and invite the government to bring further proposals. My problem, and I'm sorry, I have several members of parliament who are my friends, but truth is truth. My problem is that I also doubt the quality of most MPs in Kenya in terms of their ability to take up the legislative role honestly. They seem to be more obsessed about taking pictures with the president. They seem to be more obsessed about leading delegations to the villages and praying all over, which is not the real mandate of members of parliament. And I hope that they wake up to the reality that they need to start auditing the government while negotiating for projects for their constituencies, which is not a bad thing, negotiating for projects, but not at the cost of your primary role, which is oversight of the government, because the government spends the money that you allocate. Two,
but isn't that interesting? Because you're negotiating for projects, yet it's Parliament that passes budgets.
The primary role of a member of Parliament is to oversight government and represent the people. When you represent the people, you negotiate for projects for your counties and your regions and your constituencies. That does not mean you are compromised, so that you start singing.
So negotiate with who?
You negotiate with the executive, you negotiate with the ministries, you negotiate with the departments, parastatals, and obviously you negotiate with the president through an institutional framework. At the moment, they're mostly negotiating on their own, which is an informal way of trying to persuade the executive to bring development projects to your area. All that is not a bad thing, except if it compromises your oversight role. So, for example, you negotiate for a road project and the president cuts budgets on roads. So how is it going to be delivered? And the perception is when you negotiate that you've been compromised because you've also taken pictures in compromising situations. So I don't want to go there because I know it can be a minefield. But then we can move to the next stage, which is your question about President Uhuru and wrangles in Jubilee. And what it portends for our politics. I think that can be dissected into two. One is to look at President Uhuru's constitutional rights as an individual, including to political association. If you start debating that, then there's a strong case to argue that this law that bars him from holding political office may be unconstitutional. But that, I think, will have to be tested in courts. I see no threat in President Uhuru holding a political office, remaining Jubilee party leader, and you certainly don't want to use retirement benefits to dissuade him from doing that. First, because it's just a wrong way, it's blackmail. Two, then immediately you start talking about his constitutional rights and the right to remain active. I mean, he's give or take just 60 or 62 or so. Where do you want him to go for the next, the remainder of his life, which could be many years, and he's such an influential figure. So I believe that, and I think I read something yesterday along those lines, that if it gets to the extreme, then they will have this litigated to test its constitutional rights. And there seems to be a lot of precedent of people getting their pensions while still holding political offices. You know, Mr. Mudavadi, Mr. Odinga, Mr. Musyoka, and all this. So that, well, let's leave to the right forum for litigation. But personally, I think it seems to me like
it never became an issue during the retirement of President Kibaki, President Moi.
Yeah, but the age gap, these are gentlemen who are retiring in their 80s and all that. And remember, the intention of this law was also to get Prime Minister Odinga out of politics at a particular point, the mischief behind the law at that point. And that's the problem when you pass laws without looking at posterity. But anyway, that will be tested at the right forum. The second one, I think, is the bigger picture of the role of political parties in Kenya's democracy, in terms of their role outside the obvious 5-year election cycles. And the infighting in Jubilee perhaps is symptomatic of political party institutions that are not strong enough, that are vulnerable to external forces. It's not very difficult to tell that Jubilee Party, particularly the members who are so-called rebels, are obviously kowtowing to some forces. It's not very difficult to tell that. So do they have strong institutions within political parties? Are political parties themselves strong enough to weather such a storm, to remain relevant, whether you are in power or not? Because the logical consequence of contesting for elections is that you're likely to win or lose. And if you lose, you should accept that, okay, we have lost. This is our role, A, B, C, D. Remember Kanini Kega and that team even contested for East African Legislative Assembly, and Jubilee Party supported them, including the Azimio team. So why change now? I don't think that what they did is anything legal. I think that Mr. Kioni is still the Secretary General. I expect the party to trigger its internal dispute resolution mechanisms. There must be an internal disciplinary process for testing this. For those who are dissatisfied, to go through them, then go to political parties tribunal and probably move to the High Court. So this is something that is evolving, but the bigger picture are our political parties evolving to be strong enough to be the vanguard, so to speak, for sustaining our democracy. And I doubt that we are there.
Okay. And Titus, tied to that is the conversation within ODM that some 9 members of parliament go to State House to meet the president. The next day they have a parliamentary group meeting. Jalango, Felix Odiwuor, appears and he's chased out of that meeting. What is the good order? Because the leader of ODM, Raila Odinga, said that if you want to go see the president on official capacity, there's no problem. But if you want to represent matters that relate to the party, you have to consult with your political party leader. So what should happen at a time that elected leaders feel compelled, for whatever reasons, that they want to associate with the elected president?
So first and foremost, there's this narrative that has been peddled for quite some time that if you want development as a member of parliament, you then must see the president of the day. I think that's fallacious because the structures that have been set in our constitution, in our laws that govern development and progress within those cadres, have provided mechanisms through which you get resources for development of constituencies, for development of wards, and it's just about a few, 2 weeks or a week before today, parliamentarians have been in Mombasa debating about the CDF money, the national government CDF, that a concept that has been introduced recently following the Supreme Court's decision. They have been there, and I think they have come to an understanding that this money is going to be given to them. So it is fallacious for someone to say that I have to be close to the president of the day to get development, because the Constitution, the laws that have been passed, provide structures which resources trickle from the top all the way to the county, to the wards. Secondly, and most importantly, the issue of MPs interacting with the leaders from various cadres has got two ways in which one could look at it. There are political implications and there are legal implications. Legal implications are to the extent that the Political Parties Act spells out very clearly how a member of parliament or how a member of a particular political party is supposed to interact with its party and other parties outside that. The Political Parties Act provides for ways in which a person is deemed to have resigned. If you promote activities of another political party, you are deemed to have resigned from your political party. Now you have to look at the manner in which these ODM MPs went to see the president in State House. Were they going there to promote the activities of Kenya Kwanza manifesto or agenda? If the answer is yes, then they are subject to being deemed as having resigned from ODM. But if they went there not to promote the activities of Kenya Kwanza or UDA, then nobody can say that they should be deemed to have resigned, and therefore disciplinary action cannot crystallize on their part.
But how possible is it to implement that provision? Because in the previous parliament, I think the person who came closest to being expelled from the party was Senator Isaac Mwaura, and he still made his way back. Actually, a new senator to succeed him had already been identified and I think gazetted. Yeah. How possible is it to implement that law?
Now, that law is possible to be implemented. It's possible to be executed. But the problem always comes in with the manner, the procedure of trying to remove or to discipline this member that is that is presumed to have gone against the objectives of the party. Most of the times you'll see that the procedure that has been laid out in the Political Parties Act, together with the constitution of parties, is never followed. When they initiate the process of discipline, you will find that probably this member of parliament has not been given sufficient notice. He has not been served with the requisite documents. The accusations have not been supported by cogent grounds. So even if the internal mechanism, which in most cases of political parties are always biased, because they will want to toe the line of the party leader of that political party. So the decisions of the internal disciplinary mechanisms are always biased. And after the decision of an internal mechanism has been issued, such individuals have got a recourse to appeal to the High Court and all the way to the Court of Appeal. Right. So, and the Court of Appeal and the High Court will look at the facts and the law. So if you miss out on that, that is how these cases suffer that kind of fatality. And I think this affects most of the issues because we litigate about these issues. But most importantly, and on the other side, on the issue of political implications, these MPs go to State House, and it is alleged that they did not inform their party leader. They did not seek approval from their party. So what implication does it have? First of all, the supporters, the people who voted for them on this ODM ticket feel that these people all along have not been supporting ODM as it was presumed. And therefore, profiling stats are there. So in as much as they may succeed legally to keep themselves in the party, but politically, they are going to lose the support. They are going to be always viewed as if these are moles that have been sent to the party, and they are always on the other side. So those are the implications that they are likely to suffer. Yeah.
And yet, again,
yes,
we seem to miss the real issues because we don't know what those MPs speak about with the president. Yeah. But still we feel the key concerns, Kenyans are not dealing with them. So is there a way of the Kenyan telling their elected leader, for whatever level they are, what they need to do?
No. Some, you probably know that I come from Nyanza, and you know the political temperatures there and perceptions and all that. I honestly think that the situation of the 9 members of parliament has been over-stigmatized, particularly by the party, of a total overreaction over nothing, primarily because, except for Jubilee party, in fact, just in the last 1 week or so, the president has been meeting members of parliament from different regions, and they grow across parties. From Kisii, from Luhyaland, including ODM members from Luhyaland. They have gone there, including those who supported Mr. Odinga more than anyone else, including from Coast, and yesterday from Rift Valley and all that. So I think this is much ado over nothing. If the members of parliament pretended to be representing the party, then we start negotiating, we start talking about whether they needed to consult their party leadership or not, or whether they are going to sabotage the party in parliament or not. Having said that, We have a history in Kenya of the executive trying to intrude into the opposition, divide by probably dealing with specific people who then eventually may sabotage the agenda of the opposition by supporting the government. So I'm yet to see whether that's the direction this is headed. The 9 members of parliament, except for Professor Jenda, are people doing second or third term in parliament. There are people that you can also trace their loyalty to the party leader without much question. Mark Nyamita, Ochanda, I know quite a number of them. I don't think that they can even risk sabotaging Azimio in parliament. And the bigger question that somebody was asking me yesterday, and that I think perhaps needs to come out, is how did they get back to parliament? You probably need to ask those. We were talking about strength of political parties and all that. The general disquiet in Nyanza is that everyone was given direct ODM ticket under very cloudy circumstances, except for the member of parliament for Kisumu Central, Ouda, Fred Ouda, and of course Advocate Olaga Loch. The rest got back their tickets and became re-elected, around 98%. Across the country, just around 40% were elected, 40 to 50. So you start asking those questions. Did they become over-entitled? Or did some compromise the process and therefore are in a revenge mission? You see? So there are bigger underlying issues here before you start talking about what they went to deal with the president. But I think that it helps going forward that the president also engages in a structured way of dealing with regional leaders. If this was a follow-up meeting for his visit to Nyanza, then probably needed to impress everyone, because in Nyanza, everyone welcomed him. Okay. And I think that should apply to all other regions. To avoid this suspicion, to avoid character assassination and all this. I mean, Jalango is just a first-time MP. I mean, what threat does Jalango pose to ODM, for heaven's sake? I don't think so. He needs ODM more than ODM needs him, you see. So we don't need to destroy people's career at this early stage by sabotaging them. You know, they'll start labeling them as traitors and things like that. And this is a guy who has been very successful in entertainment industry and media industry, and he's just moved into politics. We need him there. And you want to just let him go like that? I mean, stop joking. Okay. All right. And for you, Titus, because these are not just the only meetings that are happening. Last week, we saw the president meeting with the governors in the summit. I think it's one of the rarest meetings to ever see happening in this country. But also, in between, there has been several conversations between the president and the county chiefs. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be political when it comes to parliamentarians, but it's okay for governors because they have executive power and they need resources to implement in their areas? How do you deal with all these politics of suspicion going into the future? Now, what is most important is, first of all these leaders to understand the role or the mandate of their offices as number one. When you look at the role of a governor, he is the manager of a county government. And the manner in which resources trickle down to them is directly from the executive. And this money is, of course, propelled to them through parliament. So one of the biggest role of parliament is to oversight the executive. So once you understand those roles of these two offices, one will easily know how these officers or MPs and governors are supposed to interact with the office of the president. What I'm saying is that interacting with the president is something that you cannot avoid, especially if you serve in any political office, because you need development, you need to progress the constituents which you represent. But on the other hand, there is something called political party affiliation, which is very key. It may not even have legal implications, or even if legal implications ensue, you are likely to get away with it. But the perception, remember, politics at all cadres is greatly affected by the perception. Once the electorate, once the people who elected you or voted for you start perceiving that you are now leaning
with the other camp more than their side, that's when your trouble begins. But as regards executing development agenda, the role of governors, in my assessment, needs a closer interaction with the executive more than even MPs, because for them to get these resources, they have to engage. That's why you see you have IBEC, which the Deputy President has been given to always chair on behalf of the President. So they interact one-on-one with the executive for purposes of ensuring that the budgetary allocation, the 15% that has been given to them by the Constitution, is disbursed in time. Because you can imagine if there is a rift, there is no interaction between governors and the office of the President. Disbursing this money will become an ordeal. So the governors are allowed to interact more with the President, but when it comes to matters politics, a line needs to be drawn such that there shouldn't be any perception that this governor, in much as he belongs to this party, he seems to be leaning so much towards the government side. On the other hand, when you look at the role of MPs, one of their main role is to oversight the executive. And how resources trickle to them, they're the ones who pass the laws. So in my view, parliamentarians need not really to interact with the President a lot. But even if they interact with him, let them follow the channels that have also been laid out in their political parties, for the sake of ensuring that perception is not negative from the political constituencies that they come from.
Dr. Kwando doesn't agree with you.
I actually disagree.
Yeah.
I think our parties need to be consistent. If the policy is an engagement other than formal requirements like intergovernmental committee and parliamentary committees, then that should be it. If the agreement is that, okay, you can work with the President, if you are our governor, then it goes without saying that MPs should be able to also consult. The bigger point is what they are consulting on. Many regions in this country, say Northeastern, there's no way that leaders can be divided. MPs and governors, for them to negotiate for a bigger project, need to be together. So it's very important that the consultation is ongoing. The problem, as I said earlier, Sam, is that the President has made it look unnecessarily selfish. In other words, trying to take the show from everyone for no good reason. Yet it's all possible to invite ODM MPs, agree on a package of reforms, say IEBC reforms that we obviously need for the betterment of the country. By the way, it has not even taken a month since all elected and nominated women MPs, including from ODM, went to State House. That didn't raise eyebrows because it was structured. And you could tell the agenda, they were going for affirmative action and things like that. I expect youthful MPs also to do that. I then expect party MPs to do that. And we should not over-stigmatize these engagements. We should not overreact to them unless it's very clear to us that it's sabotaging coalition arrangements in Parliament, which is not the case. Totally not the case. And then in our case, and this I can now talk as son of the soil. In our case, stigmatizing Luo MPs for absolutely no reason. All right. Like, let me give you 1-2 examples. The MP for Game indicated that he went there to negotiate for additional funds to Odera Kango University so that they build some structure in honor of Professor Magoha. Not a bad thing. That's a function of the Ministry of Education, and obviously the President has a say. The MP for Rongo, and by the way, these are not people I'm in contact with. The MP for Rongo went there to negotiate for additional funding for a road project between Rongo and Rangwe, where I come from. Not a bad idea. But they should not then translate that to mean working with the government in Parliament and voting against party positions, particularly on serious issues. And some of us who are more of in the scholarly world will consider a red line when they start changing laws. The first red line, when they start talking about constitutional amendments, the Apple, they will lose us.
You know, the interesting bit is that, yes, you're saying that they went to negotiate for a project in their constituency.
For their constituents.
But they're negotiating with the President, who is one person, at a time that we have a house, 2 houses of Parliament comprising, is it 416 members, both elected and nominated. I'm just wondering, why then do you have all these institutions if they're not able to do the work of negotiating for programs that you have now to face one person?
Everyone negotiates. Yesterday, the people of Nakuru were negotiating for some land reforms around Mau, the Rironi, Mau Summit Road. If you read the newspapers, all that was happening yesterday. Remember, we are in a presidential system. And therefore, while Parliament has serious oversight roles and budgeting responsibilities, at the end of the day, the executive proposes. Mm-hmm. And once the executive proposes, then they allocate funds for regional allocation. Parliament, of course, can vary here and there, but it's a bit of horse trading here and there. Mm-hmm. And we are all agreed that there isn't enough resources in Kenya. So that means some projects can be postponed, some can be implemented, some are emergency, like the fighting banditry and drought situation and all that, which can lead to diversion of resources. Which is why governors, including ODM governors and Azimio governors, should negotiate with the executive. Okay. And which is why ODM MPs, Azimio MPs, and everyone should also negotiate. The bigger point, don't sabotage why you are elected.
All right. We have to leave it at that point. Dr. Komolo and Titus Mahana.
Yes. yes.
Thank you for making time for us of this conversation. Up next, we speak to the Governor of Kirinyaga County, Governor Anne Waiguru, who is also the chairperson of the Council of Governors. She comes here to speak about the latest concerns in the counties, what they are witnessing from the Council of Governors, but also some of the concessions that they agreed during the summit meeting that happened in Naivasha last week. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment.